I have another question.
Let's get the bring it around. I'll be able to. Yeah, there you are. Okay, go ahead.
So I'm really curious to know how your relationship with the core wound has changed over time, and how you're currently related to it now in March of 2011.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good question. Well, essentially, my relationship to it, I think this is a good point to make. I've never been asked that question quite, and never had the opportunity to respond to it. The first thing that I have to say is that my relationship to it has not fundamentally changed from the moment of my awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally, it has not changed. And interestingly enough, in this I credit my guru Adida for having lived subjectively, having lived, though not taught, something of this simultaneous wound wellness. And if you study his teaching carefully, you'll hear him acknowledging the simultaneity of all the qualities as the given of the realized existence. And his was a very embodied, the fusion of spirit and matter subjectively in him was profound, where he wasn't able to go. And of course he took that subjectively, based on his karmic character. I mean, not merely karmic in a negative sense, but who he was, his constitution, multidimensionally. He was able to take that, in effect, solitary living of this condition to places that I don't think anybody else went to. And one of them is what he would call outshining or divine translation. The analog in my life and work is what I call the white heat. And that's a whole long story I won't get into in terms of the details of how I came through with that aspect of my realization. I've addressed it elsewhere. But I'm not, I always make a point that I'm not saying that what I'm talking about is what he was talking about. I know that if he were still alive, and his devotees, certainly who are, would take vehement issue with such propositions on my part, and I don't need for what I'm saying to to pass muster of their understanding of things, because to me he's one of the last great hypermasculine masters, and part of what he couldn't do was bring his participation into mutuality. He asked other people to do something like that, but nothing like what we live. And what the two of you had a chance to particularly experience, correct me if I'm wrong, going to the Welcome to Your Second Life course with 26 other awakened practitioners and 4 senior teachers and 1 full teacher of Waking Down and Mutuality. You got a chance to be in a community of awakened beings for whom these basics are already clear. And that was a pretty amazing experience. Yes?
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah.
And the revelation of mutuality there, correct me if I'm wrong, was probably itself something of a further revelation.
Yeah.
Of the we space, of, you see, beings who are actually other from you. They're not just subsets of your great self, your great self-realization. So my basic take on this has not shifted at all from the moment of my awakening. My awakening, even in the time of my awakening, I was already considering, what does mutuality become? when it's fully given free rein in a space in which everybody is fundamentally the equal of everybody else. There are no existential superiors. But my relationship to the core wound, what's happened with it that is different, however, is my capacity to language it. When I say there's no difference, I'm describing how I was living it from that moment. But my languaging of it has changed quite a bit. And in that sense, I don't mean to say my languaging as if I understood it differently or better and just wasn't able to say it right. My actual articulation gradually caught up with the feeling participation.
How did the feeling participation change?
The feeling participation, I don't think really did. But gradually over time, I got that I was voicing. If you go back to the White Hot Yoga of the Heart, and even in the book Waking Down, I'm still talking about the core wound of confusion and separateness. And I don't use that language anymore. Now, interestingly enough, Linda often does, and other teachers may as well. And I'm not inclined to make everybody conform to, my way of speaking it. I'd rather have this be a Navajo rug mystery, like the weave that's just a little off kilter, right at the heart of the dynamo. Because we're talking, we're trying to, it's like we're putting our hands into a white hot fire to try to tinker with what's there or feel it completely, and it actually burns away our hands. So I'd prefer to leave this a little unclear, almost. But for me, what was even more primary, actually, than the designation of separateness and confusion was that I wanted to, after a couple of years, it became evident that I was talking about it differently. In fact, Van Gwen, who you've both met, Van, who's you haven't met Van?
I've met him, yeah.
You have. Van is the senior-most of the senior teachers currently active in the work. He actually was a teacher for Linda when she was awakening, briefly, along with my being her primary teacher and some other people as well, who have since left our association. But Van, at some point in 1996, spring 1996, said to me, "Are you aware that you're talking about the core wound differently now?" And I said, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yeah, I've been aware of it to some degree, and this is good for us to put attention on. And so that was the point at which I stopped referring to the core wound as something that could be healed. That's maybe the more primary way to put it. Even up through the book Waking Down, even in fact, in the book The Incarnation of Mutuality, there's still, I notice, a whole section that's titled Healing the Core Wound. So I was in transition for quite a few years of clarifying precisely how I articulate what the core wound is, in order to have it be conformed to how I'm really living it. Does that make sense? As a distinction? In other words, the way of living it was already there, but my mind, remember I say the mind can be like your dumb kid brother, chronically having to catch up. My mind was not able to catch up. I was still influenced by the hypermasculine trainings that I had inherited, much like what you were giving voice to, Zach. So over the years, the notion that you could heal the core wound became something I couldn't say anymore, whereas one of my first workshops in 1993 was called, or 1994 actually, was called Healing the Core Wound. So now, as you see at the end of great relief, the ninth secret is you can't heal the core wound, but you can become increasingly conscious of it, in it, and as it. And that's a big distinction. Because that helps you get over the notion of, well, if I'm really doing this right, there's no wound, there's no pain, there's no suffering. So that's a very primary distinction. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I really get the sense being around you and the other teachers, especially the senior teachers, of this both peace with the core wound and also a kind of loving the burn of it, loving the evolutionary impulse.
Yeah,
and
it's a very beautiful reflection.
In a way that, even though it's been, my relationship with the core wound is fundamentally shifted because of this second birth. At the same time, I still feel a deeper relaxation that's going to come, that's going to love the burn of the struggle of life, of the tension between the infinite and the finite.
Thank you.
And the increasing...
You make the image of a cross. And that actually was a language that Adida would use. You know, that life is a crucifixion. You know, he was a Christian by birth training. And so yeah, it's the impaling of the infinite on the finite, and of such profound sensitivity on such sometimes brutal actuality. I interrupted you, though. Were you going to say more? You love that love of the burn.
Yeah,
of the teachers.
Like even Zach said this once, like the core wound is life.
Yes.
Life loves the core wound. It feels to me sometimes like life at its most tender, aching part of it.
Yes.
So, yeah, for me now it comes up strongly when I'm in an ideal setting and with the ideal people I love deeply, and in a beautiful setting, and there's just this feeling that I can't let in the beauty as much as I would like. I can't let it consume me until I'm just obliterated into it and by it, and can't be... there's this, I don't know, I guess this urge and how I'm feeling the core wound of just like being consumed by the other and being consumed by what I see, and sort of wanting that strong unification rather than the pain of particularity and distinction.
Very well said. Very well said. Yeah. I have a bit of fatherly, grandfatherly pride going on here. Oh. Just listening to you.